Welcome to Women and Resistance, a powerful podcast where we honor the courage, resilience, and revolutionary spirits of women across the globe. Hosted by Fubara Eneli Esq and Adesoji Iginla, we uncover untold stories of defiance against systemic oppression. Whether colonialism, racism, sexism, or economic injustice. From historic icons like Winnie Mandela and Fannie Lou Hamer to today's trailblazers, we shine a light upon those shaping a more just world. This is a call to honor the past, embrace the present, and build an empowered future. Yes, greetings, and welcome to another episode of Women and Resistance. And with me, as usual, is my sister, Fubara Eneli Esq. Sister.
Good evening, brother. How are you? And good evening, everyone. Thank you guys so much for watching, for leaving comments, for sharing, for subscribing to the channel. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And in today's episode, we're looking at Mama Africa, Miriam Makeba. So the question would be, when she stood on the stage during her last performance, she looked back and she smiled, walked off stage, and that was the last time we would see her. What do you think she was looking back on when she looked back?
So although I'm dressed in honor of her, she loved to wear, if you guys can see, let me change my angle a little bit. She loved to wear either strapless or tops or dresses that just had one shoulder showing, sometimes strapless, and then a cloth draped over one shoulder. I'm not going to be speaking like her today. So when you ask that question, some of her musicians that they interviewed for the documentary on her life, and actually you guys can find that documentary on YouTube for free. On YouTube, it's listed as Storyville, Queen of Africa, the Miriam Makeba story, but it's also on other platforms as Mama Africa, and this came out in 2021. And they just said that, it was almost like she knew. It was appreciation, it was love. Her granddaughter, who was supposed to travel to Italy with her, and at the last minute, her grandmother told her, don't come. But at the same time said to her, keep the legacy going, take care of my legacy. So maybe she had some sense that it was her time. I mean, she had already survived 2 bouts of cancer. So as a very, very young woman, before she was 20, she had already gone through breast cancer. And then she ended up also having a hysterectomy when she was diagnosed with, I believe it was cervical cancer in the U.S. And Haile Belafonte was actually instrumental in making sure that she got the medical care that she needed. So when you look at her life, and we'll start at the beginning, which is where she was born and all of that. And when you look at her life and all the things that she experienced and all the people she buried, of course, her father died when she was 5
young.
or 6 years old.
Yep.
Her mother passed away, and we'll parse through all of this shortly after she left South Africa. And of course, she was not allowed to come back. And so she was not there to bury her mother. She buried a daughter, her only child.
Bongi.
She buried a grandchild, because Bongi actually had a stillbirth and then died shortly after that. I think there was another grandchild that was buried as well that ate something or whatever, and they couldn't figure it out, and the child died before the mother died, and they're saying that the mother was never the same after that, the mother being Bongi. Then she lost family members in the Sharpeville massacre, which we'll talk more about.
Yep.
So, she'd seen a lot, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. As we talk more, we'll talk more about the details of her life. But yeah, so maybe she just knew that it was her time, or maybe she was tired. She certainly was a warrior as much as she was a healer as well.
She went out swinging, as they would say.
Yes, she did.
Because the concert she went to perform at was for Roberto Salvino, who himself had written about the mafia and was in hiding. And so it was like a hack back to the time she was not allowed to return to South Africa. And she basically had to keep the names of the likes of Robert Sobukwe, Nelson Mandela, Winnie Mandela alive whilst she was outside. But then that also came at a cost. So the cost is, like we normally say, people start, these people we're looking at were ordinary people who did extraordinary things. So how would you describe her extraordinary lifestyle? I won't say lifestyle.
Let me start with just, her from the very beginning. My goodness, what a life. So she was named, actually, if you Google this on YouTube, there's an interview of hers where she starts off with saying her names. It goes on for like a minute plus. All these names that she had, which obviously had meaning. I'm not even going to try that. So the basic names that she had were Zenzile Miriam Makeba, whom we, now know as Mama Africa. She was born on March 4th in 1932. Not that long ago, because my mother-in-law was born in 1932. I was thinking about that as I was going over my notes. She was born in Prospect Township in Johannesburg in South Africa. She was of the Xhosa, and although I should go Xhosa.
Yeah.
And Swazi heritage.
Yeah.
She was raised in the segregated townships of South Africa. That's how it was then. Under apartheid. So this wasn't something she was reading about. This was something that she lived. And so her father was actually a teacher, and her mother was a domestic. So when we mean a domestic, she basically went and cleaned white people's homes, okay? But to make extra money, her mother also brewed beer, local beer. And there's a song that goes Kumbotu. So there was a song they sang during
by
Festac
Yvonne
77.
Shaka Shaka. Yeah.
Kumbotu. I work hard every day to brew my beer. Kumbotu. Okay. So anyway, what these colonizers had done in South Africa, which, by the way, they did in almost every other African nation, is they basically banned the indigenous people from making their own alcohol, thereby creating a market for imported alcohol, which, by the way, is still what is consumed at major parties and all of that across the African continent.
Yep.
And so you could actually go to jail for making your own natural, your own local alcohol, your own local beer. So her mother was
sort of like the prohibition in the United States.
Exactly. So her mother made beer and sold beer, and the colonizers sent their soldiers after her. And at the time that they arrested her mother, and I believe her mother's name was Christine, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Christine, yeah. And she was...
Miriam Makeba was 18 days old. I can just imagine, probably on her mother's hip or tied on her mother's back. That's what I did when I had to work when my kids were really little. I just put them on my back and tied them up, and they were happy and I was happy, and we were all free to do what we needed to do. And so when they arrested her mother, they arrested her too. I mean, not in the sense that she was handcuffed or anything, but she went to jail with her mother at 18 months. and served out a 6-month jail term. So if any of you, whether you've been a mother, whether you've been a father, whether you've had a nephew or a niece or a younger brother or whatever, sister, if you can imagine a mother being sent off to jail for what? Like, what was her crime? And taking an 18-day-old, which she was probably breastfeeding. And that child is now sentenced to jail as well for 6 months. So that's how her life started. And then at some point, her family moved to Sophia town. That's where she was raised as a little girl. Of course, like I said, her father passed away when she was very young. Sophia town was kind of like Harlem in the United States. Jazz and, that's the music center, if you will. There's a lot of art and just the heartbeat of a nation, if you will, taking place. Of course, it was politically turbulent at the time, but Miriam Makeba's love for music was nurtured by her mother, who would teach her songs in their language, songs of healing, actually, because her mother was what we call a sangoma. A sangoma is a healer, and Miriam Makeba was also a healer. And listening to her granddaughter, it appears that she too is as well. And her daughter was as well, Bongi. So Sanu Bongi. Bongi actually co-wrote or wrote quite a few of Miriam Makeba's hits. Song. But unfortunately, we'll get to that, what happened with her. So her love for music was nurtured within family and in this area. Her brother played the piano. And when her brother realized that she could sing, he would actually teach her songs in English. And she didn't even know what she was singing. But they were very much influenced by the American music scene. So they were playing jazz, and she's singing a tisket, a tasket, all of that, and not really even knowing what the words were. She sang in her school choir and began performing at an early age in church and at local community events. Her career, so to speak, began she started with the Manhattan Brothers. And she said when she realized she could get paid to sing, it was amazing. Like, what? You can actually do this. Coming from a mother who is trying to make ends meet and rubbing floors for white people who can't stand you and so on and so forth. And so in the 1950s, she joined the Manhattan Brothers. She also played with, I believe, the Cuban Brothers as well.
And the Skylarks.
Yes. And then eventually they formed the Skylarks. And they say that the Skylarks was actually, it's a girl group. And they were inspired by all the girl groups in the United States. Yes. And the men just would, including Hugh Masekela, who became her husband. Some of you may know him. He's a famed jazz musician. And he wrote her song, Soweto Blues. And I'll go through the lyrics of that later if we have time. But he said, the Skylarks and Miriam Makeba, they were just like the most beautiful women in all of South Africa. Everybody wanted to be like them, how they dressed, how they carried themselves. He said they wore these really high heels. And again, if you watch the documentary, there's a part where she's singing a song and there are a row of men. And they're just like mesmerized, like they were seeing an angel. Really, it was not like lecturers or anything in their gaze,
but it's
but just like
wow,
awe. Awe, just the purity of her voice. It is important, I think, to note that Sophia town was razed. It was destroyed by these apartheid colonizers. 1955. They wanted it for themselves.
Sounds familiar.
Yes, they definitely did not like what was going on in that area, just the cultural vibrancy and all of that. And so they came after them, and they eventually were able to
level the town
and relocate the thousands and thousands of indigenous Africans who dwelled there. So South Africa's history latter history is one of extreme violence, constant trauma. Can you imagine, starting your life out in a prison and then every day just being harassed by these people who will not let you be on your own land? And so while she was performing, there was a gentleman who came from the United States, if you want to call him a gentleman, and he was recording scenes of this vibrant culture in Sophia town, and he was creating this documentary. He was able to smuggle some of his scenes out of the country, and Miriam Makeba actually sang 2 songs.
on the documentary,
on those recordings, and it was an anti-apartheid documentary called "Come Back Africa," and it was featured at all of these film festivals. And she was actually invited to come to go to Venice for the film screening at the Venice Film Festival. And at that place, I mean, people were just in awe of her. They praised her voice, her talent, all of that. An international star was born, so to speak. And so they now arranged for her to go to the United States. She needed to show that she had work. And so
that's where
she worked at a place called The Village.
Mhm.
Yes, I think that's what it was called. And while she was performing, Harry Belafonte came to see her and also invited a lot of other big names, Marlon Brando and
Sidney Poitier
and all of that. And once he heard her sing, that was it. He was taken, and he basically just whisked her away from the people that she was working with, and began to work with her, set up a tour, so that she could go out and sing. And she was saying how, initially starting, the musicians didn't really know the music. And so they had to work through things and just each week gradually add on to their repertoire, if you will. Of course, some of her compadres, if you will, who were back in South Africa, had hoped that now that she had gotten onto the stage, that she would be able to bring them along.
Yeah.
That didn't happen. We don't know exactly why, but sometimes it's just not up to you, the artist, to make those kind of demands. So her breakthrough came with the song Pata Pata, 1957. And she says she actually doesn't like that song because it has no meaning. But it's the song that people loved. And there was the song that introduced me to Miriam Makeba, because when they had Festac 77 in Nigeria, I was 6 years old. And I remember the South Africans dancing and doing that. It was kind of like, for Americans, it would kind of be like stepping. It was very powerful. And I remember that song, and it just sticks with you. And no, I'm not going to sing it. You can go Google it and listen to Pata Pata. Yeah, maybe you want to sing it.
No. I won't even try.
But that was 1957, and that was her signature hit, basically. She also gained recognition with the song that they call the Click Song, which is a traditional Xhosa wedding song that showcased the Xhosa click sounds. She also has these other songs. I was practicing these songs, but man, I was like, I'm not even going to try and do it. The one where she's doing the breathing as she's
breathing, yeah.
But she's doing it according to the beat, and it's amazing. They feature some of it in the documentary, but you can find it elsewhere as well. But amazing voice, amazing talent. So she comes to Venice. So the South African government didn't realize, I guess, that she had left the country. But once she was out and she got all this recognition, and it was for an anti-apartheid film, they basically revoked. She was trying to come back to South Africa, and they canceled her passport.
Yeah.
In the meantime, she had also sent for her daughter, Bongi, her only child. And Bongi had been taken care of by her mother, Christina. So Bongi left in 1959 as well to come be with her mother. And Christina transitioned in 1960. And unfortunately, like we said earlier, Miriam was not able to go and bury her mother, which, as you can imagine, was absolutely heartbreaking. I don't think even for her at that time, she thought it would take as long as it did for her to eventually get back home. She's 31, almost 32 years before she finally went back home. In the meantime, some of her siblings passed away, just a lot of heartbreak. We know that in 1963, she testified before the United Nations. Again, there are videos of her testimony, if you will. And what is so amazing about Miriam Makeba, and one of the reasons why I was not even going to try to do her voice or whatever, even though I am absolutely feeling her spirit here, she had such a soft tone. I mean, you're listening to Miriam Makeba and you just want to love her. You just want to hug her. It's just, and even when she was saying, I mean, again, go watch her interviews. Even when she was speaking truth to power, even when she was talking about the atrocities, even when she was, evoking this emotion for people to move, to make a difference, there was this softness to her. And she had this beautiful smile, really nice high cheekbones, great teeth, all of that. She very just natural, not, no offense, sisters, with all the tarantula eyelashes we have. Okay, I've kind of shown my bias. But this woman, for a long time, it was just a short haircut. And at one point, then she did the braids with the beads and stuff. That's why I put some on. She did a lot of headscarves. But very much representing her African culture. So at one point when she was about to go on tour, Harry Belafonte sent her to
a hairdresser in Harlem.
Hairstylist, right? Because he had helped with, getting her outfits and things like that, because she really didn't have much when she came. So he sent her to a hairstylist, and I think they must have pressed and straightened out her hair and everything.
Stretched.
Yes. And she said she came back, she looked in the mirror, and she said, "What did they do to me?" And she immediately put water on her hair. So any of you know Black women, or if you are a Black woman who deals with your natural hair, the shrinkage is real, right? And so she said she put that water back on her hair. And when she got dressed and, came out for the tour, for the performance, Harry Belafonte is like, "What did you do to your hair?"
What happened?
And she's like, what did you people try to do to my hair? Are you crazy? So very much, a woman who had a deep sense of who she was and a pride in who she was, unapologetically who she was. Of course, we know by the time she left South Africa, she got married, and had her first baby, I think when she was 17, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. You are listening to Women and Resistance with Fubara Eneli Esq and Adesoji Iginla, where we honor the voices of women who have shaped history through courage and defiance. If you're finding these stories inspiring, take a moment to subscribe, share, and support this platform. Together, we amplify the voices that deserve to be heard. Now, back to the conversation.
And so by the time she was 20, she had been married, had breast cancer, had a baby, and was divorced. Because that first husband was very abusive to her. And that first husband was James Kubai. They got married in 1949. So she was 17 when she got married. And so, that marriage didn't work. And then she married Sonny Pillay, who happened to be of Indian descent, Southeast Indian descent. And that marriage only lasted a year. So they were only married in 1959. That was it. It says married in 1959, divorced in 1959. So when I say sis knew who she was and she was taking no prisoners, she was taking no prisoners. Of course, she did play with Hugh Masekela in South Africa before she came out to the U.S., and they eventually got married in 1962. 1964. But that marriage did not last. They divorced in 1966, but stayed best of friends. As a matter of fact, he helped take care of her daughter. He wrote songs for her. When he needed something, she was there for him, and vice versa. So that relationship went on for the rest of her life. And as he says it, he's like, we were really more like brother and sister. So it wasn't acrimonious or anything like that. They kept that relationship. So she testified twice before the United Nations, one in 1963 and again in 1964. Of course, at this time, for sure, South Africa was not going to let her back because at this point she had become a global symbol of the anti-apartheid movement. And so she had found refuge in the United States, and initially, quote unquote, America embraced her. But you know, America is finicky, and we embrace you as long as you are doing what we want you to do, and it's on our terms. So like we said, she worked with notable figures like Harry Belafonte. I believe she was the first African to get a Grammy, and it was for her recording with Harry Belafonte. And she earned that Grammy in 1966, sharing the Best Folk Recording Award with Belafonte for their album An Evening with Belafonte / Makeba. The album contained politically charged songs about South Africa's oppression. So at this point, she's definitely persona non grata.
Yep.
Yes. And she continued in her activism. Her next husband is someone that I think many of us would know, Stokely Carmichael, who eventually was known as Kwame Ture. And it was a really interesting story that he tells about meeting her. So he first met her when he was a student, and Harry Belafonte was, I guess, maybe mentoring them, because you guys know Harry Belafonte was very active in the civil rights movement. And Harry Belafonte said, oh, well, you know, there's this event, a concert happening, you know, like you guys to come, and so on and so forth. And Kwame Ture said initially he was like, nah, not interested, you know, I don't want to go. And then Harry Belafonte said, oh, well, Miriam Makeba is going to be there. And at that point, it was like, oh, yeah, I want to be there. I want to be on the front row and all of that stuff, because he'd actually heard her music. And again, you have to go and see pictures of this woman. She's ethereal. She was just effortlessly gorgeous, absolutely stunning. And again, like I said, there was this tonation of hers. There was this energy that was truly very soothing, healing. I can't even imagine her yelling at anybody. It would be the kind of like, baby, stop doing that. What is wrong with hair? You know, hair, because, you know, South Africans don't say her like we do. It's just like, I can't even imagine her yell. That's how, I just love her. You guys got to go watch the documentary. Watch all the things about her. Get immersed in her music if you don't already know her music. And so Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, whom I actually met. I met Kwame Ture when I was a youngster at Ohio State University. I would say I was his bodyguard. Let's just leave it at that. But at any rate, he was smitten with her, right? And so they had a chance to meet again, but this time it was in Guinea, because Stokely Carmichael when he changed his name to Kwame Ture, Ture is actually from Sekou Touré. And Kwame is from Kwame Nkrumah.
Yeah.
And so he had a chance, and he met her again in Guinea. And at this time, he's a known name as well, you know, so they're both known names. And so when he, you know, introduced himself, she was like, oh, it's a pleasure to meet you. And he's like, no, we've met before. And he said he was so crushed that she had no recollection of the first time that they met. I guess he wasn't as impressive as he thought. But he, in his mind, was like, I want her. I want to marry her. And Stokely shot his shot, because he's 9 years older than she is. No, sorry, 9 years younger than she is or was. And they eventually got married. They got married in 1968. And you got to go see their wedding pictures. Absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful.
But here comes America and its ugliness. So she was feted all across the United States, selling out tours, all of that, you know, concerts, all of that kind of thing. And the day after she got married, they just started canceling. Silent. And you know what? I'm going to call a thing a thing. I am all for working with people who want to work with me for our common humanity, for our liberation. And we often talk about white supremacy in general. Mm-hmm. But at some point, there does have to be a conversation about the role Jewish Americans have played, not just sometimes in assisting with our liberation, like the founding of the NAACP, and we give full credit for that, but also the role that they've played in oppressing Black people, African Americans, Africans across the globe. I mean, we need to tell all the stories. We need to really have the full picture. And at that point, and some may argue even till today, Jewish Americans were very much in control of the music scene. And they canceled her tour and her different concerts because they said they cannot feed a person who is against them. In other words, because she was married to Kwame Ture, and Kwame Ture was very vocal and he spoke out, and some of people considered him an anti-Semite because he was just speaking truth to power. You're married to him. We're canceling. All of a sudden, we're not playing your music. We're not this, we're not that. And I think it's also a lesson for us, you know, African people, as we talk about our liberation. And here in the United States, we have a number of boycotts going on. Like this week, we're supposed to be boycotting Amazon. Do we have the courage of our convictions? Do we have the courage to follow through and say, if you don't respect us, if you don't treat us right, we don't spend our money with you, because other people do this. And rightly or wrongly so, American Jews felt like Kwame Ture was an enemy. And so since she was married to him, they canceled her, not just in the U.S. They put pressure on areas like France and so on and so forth. And all of a sudden, she just could not make money in this place in the way that she did before. So it's like, you know, we can just talk about, well, you know, they canceled her tours. No, but what you're trying to do is bring a person to their knees. If you know this is their source of livelihood and you cut it off, what are you trying to accomplish? It's like, we are going to bend you to our will. But we are often so magnanimous and so let God take care of it that we never use our power in the same way. And we're sharing the stories of these women, not because we have nothing else to do. This is actually a lot of reading every week, but because they're lessons to be learned. And if we learn those lessons, then we apply those lessons. And we may see us advancing a lot quicker in terms of our liberation. And so they eventually to flee the United States of America. In fact, and I have his book, Ready for Liberation, somewhere here, but you guys may know of his book, Black Power, as well. But basically, Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture knew that if he stayed in the United States, they were probably going to kill him, you know? And so Sekou Touré said, come on home. And he invited them back to Guinea, and he gave them sanctuary, and he protected them. And I wonder, in 2025, if we have any African leaders who would be so courageous as to do the same, to basically say, to hell with you, the United States, to hell with you, Israel, to hell with you, South Africa. We are taking our sister in. We're taking our brother in. Or if they would bow to the pressures of these imperialists. So she kept speaking. She kept using her music to spread the word. She was much beloved by all of the Pan-Africanist leaders. I'm saying Chokwe Lumumba, but that's not the name that I want. Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Julius Nyerere of Tanzania, Sekou Touré, of course. She named her son after Lumumba. So her daughter ended up having 2 living children. One is named Lumumba, and the second one is named after Miriam Makeba, but it's her South African name, Zenzile. And Zenzile and Lumumba are still alive, and they were featured in that documentary. I mentioned Jomo Kenyatta already, Leopold Senghor, Bouanyi of Ivory Coast. All of these leaders loved her. We should also say that initially, you want to talk about Meyer for a second? What happened with her and Golda?
Yeah, Golda Meir, the prime minister of then she was a friend, and then she became the prime minister of Israel. But once she got married to Kwame Ture, cut off completely.
And they were good friends.
Yeah,
well,
buddy.
Let me put that in quotes, because even in my life, Like if I'm the dot in the middle, I have concentric circles, and some friends might be right close, and then there'll be others that are 8 circles out, but we'll just call everybody friends. But yeah, she cut her off just like that.
And then she was popular to the point where Haile Selassie asked her to perform at the inaugural meeting of the Organization of African Unity, May 25, 1963. And she was one of a few that did. She was also the face of the Black Panther within the Algerian circle. There was a time when the Black Panthers were based in Algiers, and it was known as Black Algiers. And so she did play her role in terms of helping to garner the Pan-African movement. And her husband at the time, Kwame Ture, was a stalwart with regards to that aspect of it.
And are you speaking about the Algiers, the same group, the same freedom fighters that Ayikwa Ama had hoped to join? He had hoped to be a revolutionary with them, and they did not accept him.
Like, you're way too smart to be a revolutionary. There is something about you. You must be a plant or something. And then
Go write your books.
Go write your books, man. Go write your books. So there is one part I wanted to, when you mentioned her soft-spokenness with regards to how she was able to articulate the pain, but without being too, I won't say not forceful, but saying it in such a voice that you can hear it. I just want to read a part of the speech she gave on June 16, 1963, when she addressed the United Nations Special Committee on the Policies of Apartheid. And my note says, well, in a quiet voice, like you said, she said, some 5,000 people have in recent months been put behind prison bars. Amongst those who have been jailed and detained are so many of our prominent leaders, which include Chief A.J. Lutuli, Robert Sobukwe, Nelson Mandela, Mrs. Lillian Ngoyi, and only last week, Mr. Walter Sisulu. These people must be released at once. I am certain nobody can liberate his people when he is a prison cell or a concentration camp. My country has been turned by the Hendvervoet, which was the government of the Apartheid at the time, into a huge prison. I feel certain that the time has come for the whole of humanity to shout, halt, and to act with firmness to stop these crazy rulers from dragging our country into a horrible disaster. So, when you say stuff like that on an international stage with the world listening,
whole world listening at the United Nations.
At the United Nations, So, when you do that, it's more than likely that you're going to become an enemy of the state, which is what she became.
Well, she was already an enemy.
No, I'm saying
just from that documentary,
cemented her status with them.
Yes.
In light of the fact that she, like she said, fighting for their humanity. You go into a place, you arrived in a place in 1652, and you begin to turn that place into a concentration camp. Because when you move people off the land with
an open air concentration camp, where else have we seen that recently?
Gaza, And so when you see all of this history playing back, the only reason why we're not able to connect the dots again is because we need to do much more reading. Because once you read, you see patterns. And then you're able to sometimes stop them even before they bud. But because we're running helter-skelter, but the truths are right, they're right around us. So with Miriam Makeba, she not only used her voice, her music. In fact, all of her music, she starts with an introduction into what apartheid is all about. Mm-hmm. So in spite of the fact that she's only, in inverted commas, a musician, she still used the time allotted to her in the pursuit of the respect of humanity.
Yeah.
So,
and I think her experience in Sophie Town, well, listen, her experience from birth, her experience from her earliest, before she could even remember anything, I think shaped her for this resistance. Because unlike some of us who feel like if we play nice, somehow we will be spared, she lived and saw that there was no peace with these people. It was just violence. And so just a little bit of background on Sophia Town, because I feel like as we talk about Miriam Makeba, we need to talk about the love she had for South Africa and just enriching our understanding, our history of it, which should be really important to us as some people, some Africans in the diaspora are starting to expatriate back to South Africa, but in a way that is a little harmful to the indigenous people. In Cape Town in particular, where it's like they're creating their own enclaves and keeping the native people out. And so it's just another form of gentrification, if you will, even though this one has a black face. But Sophia Town, also known as Soft Town or Kofifi, which actually that name Sophia Town was named after a colonizer's wife, was a vibrant cultural and intellectual hub in Johannesburg, South Africa. It was a unique township because it was one of the few urban areas where Black South Africans could own land, making it a center for resistance, creativity, and political activism.
Sounds
of
like
course,
Harlem.
Jazz. Jazz was huge. And there's always something about jazz and having it, having to be underground. And so there, in the documentary, you will hear some of the surviving members of the Skylarks who are talking about how white people would come in to watch them perform and then would want to take them to their homes for parties. But you couldn't be seen by the white officers, police officers. And so these women, these Black women dressed to the nines would have to, hide themselves in the car and be covered up until they got to their location. And then they would have to, all the curtains are drawn and the music isn't played too loud. But every once in a while, someone would report and say, we think we saw, Bantus, over in this place, because, that's what they call them. We'll go watch Cry Freedom, Steve Biko. And once they hear the commotion, what they would do is they would quickly put on aprons as though they were servants. And so when the white police officers would come in, the same people they were just partying with would say, oh, no, they're just servants. They're just here to serve us at our party. And so if you could just imagine living that life and the humiliation of it all, just always being in your face that you are not human enough, you are not equal. So anyway, the government saw this place as a threat. And in 1955, they demolished pretty much the whole place, rebuilding it as a whites-only suburb named Triumph, Triomf. Imagine that. So initially it was established in the early 20th century on land originally that was part of the Waterfall Farm. And it shouldn't say that because it was land owned by Black people.
Exactly.
And then it was seized from them. In 1897, property speculator Herman Tobianski purchased 237 acres. Purchased from whom? You got to question all of this stuff. And named the township after his wife, Sophia. And as I said, unlike many other Black townships, which were strictly controlled by the government, this area was like a freehold area. So there were Black people, colored people, Indian, and Chinese. And for those of you in America who are saying, how are Black and colored different? There was a difference. Adesoji, do you want to talk about what that difference was?
So colored was essentially what you consider your mixed, because miscegenation, the mixing of the races was a crime, which is why the title of Trevor Noah's book is titled Born a Crime. Because you were not supposed...
book, sorry, please go ahead.
Because you were not supposed to be seen with, the races were not supposed to mix.
And Trevor Noah talks about how his Black South African mother in public had to act like she was his nanny. Because if she claimed him as a son, then it's going to be, oh, wait a second, so you must have slept with a white man. And then she would be in trouble. So if you can just imagine that, yes, that book, Born a Crime. And there are two versions of that book. One is for young adults, so it's like a little simpler to read, and then there's an adult version. So check that out as well. So, and that also explains how Miriam Makeba was able to then marry Pillay, because
yeah.
he was Indian. So there were a lot of mixed races in that area, if you will. So by the 90s, this area, the Sophia town, had grown into a bustling neighborhood of nearly, I want you to remember this number, 54,000 Black residents, along with smaller numbers of colored, Indian, and Chinese families. There was poverty, there was overcrowding, but there was also this rich cultural and intellectual life. And so writers like Kanthemba came from there, Blok Modisane, Eskia Mfafele, Don Matere, and Louis Nkosi all chronicle life in Sophia town. Musicians like Todd Machikazi Kiza and Nat Nakasa also helped to shape the jazz scene. And then, of course, political activists like Nelson Mandela and Ruth First made it a center for the anti-apartheid movement.
Yeah.
And of course, this whole time, the colonizers as seething. So Sophia Town's location close to a white working class neighborhood made it a target for the apartheid government, which saw it as a slum that needed to be cleared. Where else do you hear this? So now in Washington, D.C., they're trying to move people out and make sure we don't have any homeless people. But no, cut all the services. So where are you going to move these people to? The rise of the National Party in 1948 accelerated these efforts to basically get rid of this slum, right, where these people were free and moving around. And the Natives Resettlement Act in 1954 gave the government the legal authority. And when we say legal, as an attorney myself, we should just know that these are just words, because these laws are not coming down from God. Human beings, remember, it was once legal to own people here in the United States, where I am. But anyway, the Natives Resettlement Act. Just think about it all. It's you're acknowledging they own the place. They are the natives. This place is native to them, right? But gave the government legal authority. And then listen to the next part. To forcibly remove Black South Africans. And what is the clown, the felon-in-chief, trying to do right now? Pretty much get legal authority to do whatever. Of course, the residents resisted fiercely. If you go on the internet, you'll see signs where they had, we won't move. Leaders like Nelson Mandela, Helen Joseph, and Father Trevor Huddleston played key roles in the resistance, but the government just went right ahead. And on February 9th, 1955, 2,000 heavily armed police officers carrying rifles and traditional clubs arrived to start beating and forcibly remove Black families. It took them 8 years, so think of it.
8 years.
8 years of terror. 8 years of terror for the government to systematically displace thousands of residents. Over 54,000 Black families were sent to Meadowlands in Soweto. Colored residents were moved to El Dorado Park, Westbury, and New Gizig. Indians were relocated to Lenasia, and Chinese residents were moved to central Johannesburg, because we cannot have you all unify. We cannot have you all come together and understand that we are your common enemy. We got to keep you scattered, give one group a little bit more rights than the other, and keep you all at loggerheads. After the forced removals and demolition, the area was rebuilt by the government. As I said, Triumph, Afrikaans for triumph, to serve as a suburb for poor white Afrikaners, the same ones that the felon-in-chief is now going to give visas
citizenship to.
Citizenship and all of that to come to the United States of America. But let's get back to our sister. We never got away from her, but it's just having an understanding of
where she comes from.
Yes. You know, the soil from which she grew. And so you see her performing across Africa in particular, eventually Europe as well. Belgium in particular took her in. She did have a home in Belgium. That's where she lived really at the time of her death. And as Adesoji said, she was still fighting up until her death on November 9th, 2008, where at the age of 76, she literally had just performed And as you heard earlier, she looked back at her musicians, smiled, walked off the stage, barely got off the stage, and collapsed. They said she had a heart attack, and she transitioned. I do want to share the lyrics of Soweto Blues, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
All right. Deep breaths. I have to say this before I read this. You know, there's a lot of music coming out of South Africa right now, and I think some of you may know one of the more popular musicians from South Africa at this time is Tyler. And I have to tell you, being immersed in Miriam Makeba's life in music, and then occasionally going online and seeing Make Me Sweat,
Make me water. Yeah.
Listen, I've been young, I get it, but
no.
Miriam Makeba was young too at one point. And it's just like, yes, Sandra, there are so many parallels in the U.S. and in the continent. But again, people come out of their experiences, right? And so perhaps she's coming out of whatever her experience is and whatever she feels it is that she needs to do. No, I'm not shading anybody. She's young. She's as young as my daughters. So, you know, they're still growing. I was growing at that age. But however, I do think that those of us who are a little older have a responsibility to speak truth, to, you know, tap and say, hey, reconsider or think about this. Definitely, when you talk about Miriam Makeba, she was sensual. There's no question about it. I mean, when she did that dance and she would swirl her hips and turn all around on pata pata, I mean, she was all woman. Okay, no question about it. But it wasn't like
the main
thing. It wasn't, I'm selling myself sexually. Okay. Let me get off my soapbox. Let me read the Soweto Blues. I'm going to try and read it in Mama Africa's just soft, beautiful, soothing tone. And probably going to fail miserably at it. Okay. Soweto Blues by Hugh Masekela. The children got a letter from the master. It said, no more Kosa, Soto, no more Zulu. Refusing to comply, they sent an answer. That's when the policemen came to the rescue. Children were flying, bullets dying, the mothers screaming and crying. The fathers were working in the city. The evening news brought out all the publicity, just a little atrocity. Deep in the city, Soweto Blues, Soweto Blues. There was a full moon on the golden city. Looking at the door was the man without pity, accusing everyone of conspiracy. Tightening the curfew, charging people with walking. Yes, the border is where he was waiting for the children. Frightened and running. A handful got away, but all the others hurried their chain without any publicity. It's wrong. Beware it. Just a little atrocity. Deep in the city, Soweto Blues. Where were the men when the children were throwing stones, when the children were being shot? Where were you? That question, and this was written by a man, brings to mind my community today in Killeen, Texas, where on Monday, 2 days ago, a 13-year-old girl stabbed a 14-year-old girl to death. I've now had an opportunity to talk with both families. This issue was completely avoidable. I asked, where was our community? Why didn't we protect these children from themselves? And now reading Soweto Blues, I'm asking, where were the men when our girls were fighting each other? When our young boys were brandishing Glocks, where are our men? What will Mama Africa say today? Her legacy endures. She has received numerous honorary doctorates from various schools. She's received many awards. She has championed many humanitarian causes. In all of the areas that she's lived, people talk about how she would feed anyone who came to our house, how she would feed musicians, how she would pay for education for the young people in the area. And with her foundation, the Miriam Makeba Foundation, that work continues today. I was going to try and sing one song. I don't know that I dare. But when she visited Tanzania, when Julius Nyerere invited her to Tanzania, she heard a song called Malaika. Julius Nyerere absolutely loved Miriam Makeba because she sang so many of her songs in her native language. And she quickly learned Malaika, learned to sing it in Swahili. She was multilingual, and actually she was a polyglot. And she went on to sing this song, and I will take a stab at the very beginning part of it, only because of what it also... She sang all kinds of music. There's one song that I absolutely loved as a little girl, Where Is Your Love That You're Hiding? Gotta go listen to that as well. But Malaika is basically a song of a young man singing to a woman, and he's calling her his angel, Malaika angel. And he's saying, I would love to marry you, but I don't have money. I don't have the resources. And even in that song, as gentle and as beautiful as the melody is, and as the words sound, especially when you don't know what it means, it also speaks to what's even affecting our community today, this lack of identity. When young men no longer have the resources to get married, when young men and women no longer come together in marriage to build families, when people are being scattered, this loss of identity is something that plagues us, not just here in the U.S. or in the diaspora, but also on the continent. And so let's try. Mama Africa, you're going to have to help me here. Malaika, nakupenda malaika, malaika, nakupenda malaika, ningo kumaliwe, ningo. You got to go hear her sing it because it's so beautiful. But that is just a little bit about our beautiful Mama Africa, who even today is inspiring us. There are many books that you can get on Miriam Makeba. I, for the life of me, could not find my copy of her book.
My Story.
But I had been studying her for a while, so I was able to go to my notes. But it's called Makeba, My Story. It was published in 1988. It's an autobiography co-written with James Hall, chronicling her life from childhood in Apartheid, South Africa, to her global music career, political exile, and activism. There are books about her, Miriam Makeba, The Miriam Makeba Story, published in 2001. Miriam Makeba, Mother Africa by Sile Kumalo, a tribute to her legacy and influence. And if you listen to artists like Angelique Kidjo, she would tell you this. Miriam Makeba was a huge influence. Who was the other lady I was just talking to you about? Frazi?
Brenda Fassie.
Brenda Farsi. Even though she went a different route, very much so.
Yvonne Shaka
and so
Shaka.
You also have
Yvonne Shaka Shaka.
Yes. All of them. Soweto Blues, which covers jazz, popular music, and politics in South Africa, by Gwen Ansell, describes her contributions. African music, power in being in colonial Zimbabwe, mentions Makeba's impact on African music and resistance movements. To Make a World Safe for Revolution, Cubans in Angola, also discusses her role in African liberation movements. And I think what you see with her, Billie Holiday, and you'll see that with some of the other artists we'll cover, is they did not see themselves as, oh, I'm an artist, I'm a celebrity, that you guys do your thing over there. I think, was it Lil Wayne or something that was like, I don't know what these people are doing. He's not black. Black Lives Matter. I did that. That has nothing to do with me, which is ridiculous. These artists saw themselves as part and parcel of the struggle, and they use their platforms to advance that struggle. I should also say this, Mama Africa, again, this amazing woman, just totally in charge of her life. She did divorce Kwame Ture because, can you believe that brother had the nerve to cheat on her? Are you serious right now? You gonna chase her, all of that, you get her, And who knows? There could be more to the story. Certainly because she had a hysterectomy, she couldn't have kids, because we know that Kwame Ture later married another African sister. They had 2 children. She was a physician, and his sons are still alive. I believe she's still alive. So they got divorced in 1978. They were married for 10 years. And then in 1980, she did marry a Ghanaian airline executive, Bigyot Ba, who at the time of the documentary was still alive and kicking. And he talks about just even the further trauma that she experienced when Sekou Touré. You want to talk about that part, Adesoji, as we wrap up?
When Sekou Touré did what?
When he was overthrown and the
when he was overthrown and the people who took over power decided to come after her and started harassing her, so she had to flee Guinea, thinking she was in Africa, surely no harm should come to her. But alas, in the imperialists, once they get the main target, any underlings, in her case, she was considered an underling, will become cannon fodder. So she had to escape Guinea. And the fact that the gentleman in Ghana had already been overthrown, there was literally no place for her to go on the continent, that she had to, seek asylum in Belgium, which is where she spent the last of her days.
And we do know that after Nelson Mandela became president, he did invite her back. He personally invited her back. She did come back. She expresses some shock, definitely feeling like the landscape had changed in terms of African leadership. And there wasn't that notion of Pan-Africanism the way it had been with some of the other leaders.
Uh-huh.
So she was saddened by that. Of course, she came back to finally visit her mother's grave. 2 of her siblings had also transitioned during the time that she'd been away. Of course, she lost her daughter, who died at age 35, right after childbirth in Guinea. She'd also she buried that stillborn child, and then she buried another child, another grandchild from her daughter. So yeah, just a lot that went on with her. But you go and watch her music, watch her videos, you cannot see that trauma and pain in how she carried herself necessarily, like not broken. She was very much a healer is what I would say, very much in tune with herself and her power, and very much aware that she would not be broken no matter what. And so today we just give all kudos, if you will. Maybe I shouldn't use that word. No. We give all honor to Denzile Miriam Makeba, who showed us what womanhood, what being a healer, what being an artist, what being an activist, what being a revolutionary should look like. And the more we study these women, the more I'm inclined to snicker when some of us call ourselves revolutionaries. Because we haven't even earned the R in revolutionary. We're still looking for our soft lives. We are not here for the smoke. We really aren't. But hopefully, as we continue to study these women, their energy will strengthen our spines and allow us to know that even when it seems like you've lost it all, you haven't if you have yourself, if you stay connected to your ancestors.
And also another thing to mention is the fact that they don't have any cape. They were just being themselves. And the actions is what we're talking about right now. From Lorraine Hansberry, Billie Holiday, Mama Kuti, Queen of the Maroons, and to Miriam Makeba. What did they do? They just were there. And when the time came for them to stand or speak up, they did. That was it.
They did. And they weathered the storm of racism, and they also weathered the storms of sexism. I was going to bring that up.
I know.
Brothers, get it together, y'all. Get it together.
I know. The thing is, when we're doing the research, we found out that Brother Kwame Ture had strayed. It was a gut punch, but hey,
No, brother.
Can you imagine?
Yes.
So yeah. But again, we've come to the end of another one. You want to tell us who we'll be talking about next week?
An absolute powerhouse. As a matter of fact, hold up. When I was first introduced to her is when I went to the opening of the book launch for this in Columbus, Ohio. Septima Clark. Look at that figure. Look at her. Like, who are you talking? Who are you talking to? This is the original. Do you know who I am? Yeah. You know what this picture reminds me of? There's a picture of John Henry Clark where he's kind of like looking away with his hand on his chin in that way too, like, yes.
Yeah, Septima Clark.
I only debate my equals. All others I
teach.
But Septima Clark is who we're going to cover next week. And you are absolutely, if you don't know anything about her, or you know very little about her, phenomenal. Powerhouse. She should be known in the same way that we know Fannie Lou Hamer and even more. Actually, she should be better known than Martin Luther King and Kwame Ture. No. She actually had some beef with Kwame Ture.
I know.
Yeah. She was like, little peep squeak, you need to go sit down.
Okay.
Sandra says, I'm encouraged and strengthened each week. These women were phenomenal. They survived and overcame so much. Yes, they did. And we will too, because we are their daughters. And you are their sons.
Thank you.
Yes. But thank you all for joining again. Please share, all the things.
Thank you. Thank you for coming through. And again, leave comments. We do answer comments. And thank you all for coming through. And next week, Septima Clark. Hopefully no, but we'll be doing Septima.
No singing.
No, okay. So thank you all for coming through. And from Sister Aya.
Thank you all.
And from myself, until next time, good night and God bless. That is it for this episode of Women and Resistance. Thank you for joining us in amplifying the voices of women who challenged injustice and changed the course of history. Be sure to subscribe, share, and continue the conversation. Together, remember, we honor the past, act in the present, and shape the future. Until next time, stay inspired and stay in resistance.